Imagine you're standing in a kitchen. There's a stove in front of you. On the stove is a pot. Someone in a white chef's coat walks in and says, "Turn the heat up." You hesitate, the soup is already boiling. But the chef looks confident, professional, certain, so you turn the heat up. Now imagine that pot isn't soup. It's a situation where someone might get hurt. And the chef isn't a chef. He's just someone in authority. Today, we're talking about obedience in psychology, why humans follow orders, even when it feels uncomfortable, and sometimes even when it feels wrong. Obedience is simple to define. It's when we follow a direct order from someone we see as an authority figure, a teacher, a boss, a police officer, a doctor, a parent. From childhood, we are trained to obey. Listen to your elders, respect your teacher, follow the rules. Obedience keeps society functioning. Without it, traffic would collapse, classrooms would be chaos, and emergency systems wouldn't work. But here's the question psychology asks: at what point does obedience become dangerous? To understand that, we have to go back to 1961. A psychologist named Stanley Milgram at Yale University conducted one of the most famous and disturbing experiments in psychology. Participants were told they were part of a learning experiment. Their job? To give electric shocks to another participant whenever he answered a question incorrectly. The shocks increased gradually to 15 volts, 30 volts, 45 volts, climbing higher and higher. The person receiving the shocks? He was actually an actor. The screams were fake. But the participants didn't know that. When the actor began yelling in pain, when he begged to stop, when he fell silent, the experimenter calmly said, "The experiment requires that you continue." And here's the shocking part. About 65% of participants continued to the maximum voltage, what they believed could be lethal. These weren't cruel people. They were ordinary adults, teachers, salesmen, parents. So what happened? Why did they obey? Think of authority like gravity. When you're standing on Earth, gravity holds you down. You don't question it. You don't resist it. It just feels natural. Authority works the same way. It pulls on us psychologically. In Milgram's study, the experimenter wore a lab coat. He stood in a prestigious university. He spoke calmly and confidently. All of this signaled legitimacy. Our brains are wired to trust structured authority. It saves mental energy. If someone official tells us what to do, we assume they know better. Psychologists call this entering the agentic state, when we stop seeing ourselves as independent decision makers and start seeing ourselves as instruments carrying out someone else's wishes. It's like switching from being the driver of a car to becoming just the steering wheel. You're still moving, but someone else is controlling the direction. Another powerful factor is gradual escalation. In Milgram's experiment, participants didn't jump from 0 to maximum shock instantly. It increased step by step. This is similar to the foot in the door effect, first studied by Friedman and Fraser in 1966. When people agree to a small request, they're more likely to agree to a larger one later. It's like walking into the ocean. If you run straight into deep water, you panic. But if you walk slowly, ankle, knee, waist, before you realize it, you're swimming. Small steps make extreme outcomes feel less extreme. There's also diffusion of responsibility. Many participants later said, "I thought the experimenter was responsible." When authority takes charge, we psychologically hand over responsibility. It's like passing a heavy backpack to someone else. It feels lighter, easier, but morally, the weight still exists. A related real-world example happened during the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi official who organized deportations during World War II. He claimed he was just following orders. Now here's something important. Obedience is not always bad. In fact, society depends on it. If firefighters ignored their chief during the rescue, lives would be lost. If surgeons refused to follow hospital protocols, chaos would follow. Obedience becomes dangerous only when critical thinking disappears. Another famous study, the Stanford prison experiment conducted by Philip Zimbardo in 1971, showed how quickly people conform to roles of authority. College students randomly assigned as guards began acting cruelly toward prisoners within days. The power wasn't in their personalities. It was in the system. Authority, Environment and roles can reshape behavior dramatically. Think of obedience like a powerful tool, like fire. Fire cooks food, warms homes, powers engines. But without awareness and boundaries, it burns. Psychology doesn't tell us to stop obeying. It teaches us to become conscious of when and why we obey. So how do we resist blind obedience? First, pause. In Milgram's study, participants who physically moved further away from the authority figure were less likely to obey. Even small psychological distance can reduce obedience pressure. Second, take ownership. Instead of thinking, they told me to, shift to, I am choosing to. Language changes responsibility. Third, question legitimacy. Is the authority ethical, transparent, accountable? Authority deserves respect, but not automatic surrender. Here's the paradox of human nature. We crave structure and leadership, but we also value independence and morality. Obedience sits at the intersection of those two forces, like a river flowing between two banks, order and freedom. Too much obedience, and we drown in conformity. Too little, and society fragments. The goal is balance. Awareness is the key. When you understand how authority influences your brain, how gradual steps shift your decisions, how responsibility can quietly transfer, you regain control. You become the driver again. So next time someone in a metaphorical lab coat tells you to turn up the heat, pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this my decision? Is this aligned with my values? Because psychology shows us something both comforting and uncomfortable. Most people are not evil, but most people are more obedient than they think. And awareness, that moment of reflection, is what transforms obedience from blind following into conscious choice. And that choice, that's where real power lives. Thanks for watching.